Yo, what's up, guys? So I decided that for my next video, what I was gonna do would be a composition tier list, and probably a little bit of fighter talk in there. And I'm sure this is a video that many people would probably like, whether or not they want it, and whether or not it's even helpful to them. But it's definitely interesting to know because I've done a lot of character tier lists and just talk about fighter in general and where I think most characters are sitting in the meta currently. But I haven't done an official like team comp tier list. And the way I'm gonna do this is I'm just gonna use this on tier maker. I'll like put three characters up. Like let's say I'll just do like this and B tier, and then I'll remove them. And if you want to like save it, just pause it and screenshot it, whatever. So there are a lot of different comps I could go with. So I'm probably only gonna do like the better ones, and I'll discuss them and talk about them and why they're so good. Because obviously you can throw like any three characters together and make a comp. Like I could make so many combos with this like list of characters. So I'm not really gonna do that. I'm just gonna really talk about the ones I think are particularly good. To start off with, I'm gonna talk about what is probably the best comp in the meta right now. There are two very arguably good ones, and I think one of the best ones is Ranger, Wizard, and then Cleric. I think it's either Cleric. I think the reason it's Cleric here is because Cleric can still build tanky even after the nerfs, so that you can provide like a pseudo frontline, and then Ranger or Wizard. Obviously, there's no real nothing really surprising here. These are the two best damage characters and one of the best characters in the game in Wizard, just period. This comp pretty much covers all bases. Wizards deal with fighters, Rangers deal with barbarians, and everything else. I mean, obviously, Wizards deal with everything else too. It's just Wizards particularly deal with fighters, while Rangers deal with barbarians. They cover each other's weaknesses very well. While Cleric is just a strong, stable front line for you if they get enough tankiness, like if they get that Ruby Silver and stuff on. I think this comp does require a decent amount of gear to work, because obviously without gear, your Rangers do damage, your Cleric isn't tanky, like that type of thing. So I do think this right here is probably one of the strongest comps in the meta or in the game right now, if not the strongest. I think that this is also like there are a couple variations you could run to this. Probably like you could drop Ranger, put Barbarian in, another very strong composition. Then you have it's more of a buff ball style comp, which if you don't know what that means, pretty much means Wizard and Cleric buff the Barbarian, send him in, Barbarian wipes the team. There it is. Like, you get protection from Cleric, or Bless, any of that. Wizard gives you haste, invis, ignite. Barbarian runs in. He's just an unstoppable monster. Bam, it's over. Another one that also works with this is if you want to drop the cleric and drop the barbarian, you put ranger back in, and you can play bard. Bard is still very strong even after his nerfs. This is probably isn't as good as the other one. I think this goes in S tier, just because you're lacking a lot of frontline here. This composition is very weak to enemy rangers and enemy wizards, because pretty much every single one of you are two arrows from a fairly kitted ranger away from dying, or like two zaps to anything from a wizard basically. But I do think this is still a very strong composition. And I think if you have the other variation, like I think if you have the wizard here and then you put Barb and not Ranger, Barb and Cleric, I think this is still just as good. I think this is still like SS tier. I think this is another one of the best comps in the game, arguably the best, along with Ranger over Barbarian. The only reason being is this gives you more in a matchup of these two comps. Like if you have this comp right here versus this comp right here, because obviously like, I think these are probably the two best ones. It's very iffy on who wins, because the Barbarian has the thing that this comp does much better is this comp has much better engage. This comp right here with the Ranger instead of the Barbarian is very, it's not passive, but it's very defensive. You don't really have much push potential here. Your Cleric's not running into enemy teams fast. He's way too slow with all of his armor on. So you're very much sitting there and relying on range damage, or you're relying on your Wizard getting a very good haste invis in to kill people. And then obviously this comp here, like I said, it's kind of the opposite, where your Barbarian's just kind of sprinting in with all of his buffs on, wiping enemy teams, or at the very least taking somebody out of the fight instantaneously, trying to eliminate a backline member, and then you just play the fight 3v2, so it's much easier. However, like I said, I do think these both are both very insane comps. I think if you run them, you will find amazing success, and I do highly recommend it. Okay, and then on to the next one. So pretty much any comp with Wizard is going to be at least S tier, because this character's kind of just insane and he could carry it on his own. So for just the sake of that, we're just kind of like chill on Wizard for now. So another comp you can run is like Cleric, Ranger, and Fighter. I don't think this. I mean, this comp's S tier, not because like Fighter. I don't think Fighter fits a great spot here. I think he does what he does, and I think he's only really usable in a composition like this because you have Cleric to support him, because Fighter really needs one of the support characters, whether it be Bard or Cleric, because other than that, he has a hard time clearing PV effectively because fighters are usually going to take damage to most things. Even if you're not taking much, that's health you got to heal with either bandages or HP pots. And then Ranger supports him as well because Ranger's the best counter to Wizards in the game, other than Barbarians, because Barbarians just kind of live through Wizards. They don't really kill them that effectively. Rangers are an immediate threat to Wizards. So this is, I think, probably the best comp to run a fighter in, and this is the comp I have had the most success running fighter in. You can also run it with a Wizard over Ranger. I think this is probably I think this is slightly worse. This is kind of just like the Barbarian buff ball comp. However, the downside to fighter with buff ball, one is even if you go invis, you're obviously in heavy plate, so they can hear you coming much easier than if they hear a Barbarian coming, and your instant engage and kill potential isn't as high as a Barbarian. Like sure, if you get on a squishy, you're very likely still gonna kill them, but it takes longer. They have more time to react. They can heal them through it. That type of thing. For example, like if you send a fighter in on a cleric, the chances a fighter kills that cleric before they start healing themselves are very slim, unless they have a ton of damage and they're running like a halberd, which I do not recommend. However, Barbarian is very likely going to kill any target they get sent in on that's not like another tank, right? And okay, I think if you want to run no cleric in this comp, let's say you want to run this, like another fighter comp, I think you want to run Bard here. Bard synergizes with fighter still very well. There are a couple characters you can run here. I think Barbarian is I think literally any of these four characters right here are runnable with it. I think Barbarian's runnable, and this is a very hyper aggressive comp. You pretty much just always want to be sprinting at them with this. Obviously, you have no reliable healing outside of Bard's Tranquility, which can only heal gray health. So you don't want to take extended engagements with this is the comp that I run, that me and my team run personally. Even though obviously you see it's A tier, I think it's very good, and the reason it's A tier is because it's very versatile. You have tools to deal with pretty much anything in the meta. Fighter deals with like physical threats of like Ranger Barbarian. Barbarian deals with magical threats of Wizard Cleric, and Bard kind of just gives you buffs to deal with anything. So while I do think this is a very versatile comp, it obviously has its weaknesses. One of these really big weaknesses being Bard's very easy to get picked off here by Rangers. Chain Lightning, specifically from Wizards, absolutely decimates this comp. One Chain Lightning, and the Fighter and Bard are basically 1 HP. Like, sure, the Barb's going to take it pretty easily, but it doesn't really matter if his teammates die behind him because he's conducting it to them. And then, this comp, the one really bad weakness of this comp is that it gets countered by enemy fighters really hard. So, for example, if there's a fighter holding a doorway, this comp really doesn't get through it at all. So you kind of have to be careful about where you take your fights here. Like I say, it's very aggressive, and you always want to be running at them. But obviously, running at them with your brain on, not with your brain off. Because if you do that, it's very easy to get overextended and get picked off, or just have your entire team wiped because of that. Then I think like I said, you can run Ranger with this. This is it's okay. Ranger's very good, so it kind of makes it work. But the downside of this is, if you get into like a engagement versus another Ranger and like you're trying to poke them down with your Ranger, like let's say they have a cleric, your Ranger takes a shot, their Ranger takes a shot, you can't heal it up instantly the way they can, so you're kind of at an odd spot. Like sure, your Bard can play Tranquility and start healing you up like passively like over time, but you can't really peek your head back out because then you're like, even if you're healing slowly, you put yourself in a spot, you get a headshot, get 2 body shots from a triple shot or something, and you're just gonna fall over. So this comp is still very good. I don't think it's as good. This comp right here, I do think is actually probably one of the better A tier compositions, specifically because Wizard is so broken. I mean, like I said, obviously you could probably put it up here just because it's Wizard. And I don't even think this would be bad. Honestly, I think this is arguably an S tier comp, but I'm not quite as sure if it's as good as the ones I already had up there. So for that reason, I don't know, I'm kind of stuck. If there was like an A plus tier here, I'd probably put it. I think this, or like this is definitely like on the complete, like the very bottom end of S or the absolute peak of A. Just because, like I said, Wizard's so good. And this comp, what this comp does very well, it's kind of similar to the Barb comp over the Wizard, is it's another form of buff ball where you just buff the fighter, send them in, you buff the Wizard goes in with you, you kind of just create a distraction in their back line, or you create a distraction on the front line, make them all target you, your Wizard gets like a flank off or something, or gets to toss some good spells in, you can very easily wipe a team. There are a couple characters right now that I don't think are just very good in general. Like, I don't think Rogue or Warlock are very viable at all. Like, Warlock especially, obviously it's not a finished class. We don't count this. Just completely forget it exists. Rogue is just in a really weird spot. They've been nerfed so many times, and on top of their just recent weapon nerfs, Rogue requires a lot to, like, do anything. not only in terms of gear, but he requires very, very specific situations for fights to like work in his favor. Can Rogue work in team comps? Yes, but most of the time, what you have to do to make a rogue work is your rogue has to be sitting somewhere waiting for the team, and you have to bait them into your rogue. So the only way this really works is you can't really play rogue aggressively anymore. Like rogue can't just kind of like run at people like maybe you could like a patch or two patches ago, and like run at them like stealth around and like one shot them. And now you really have to play like they see you. Like if you see a team, they see you. You start backing up to pull them into your room where your rogue's already waiting for, and they don't hope they don't check because one of the biggest counters is rogue stealth being revealed. What can do that? Wizard can do that. If they run 10 spell slot, which is very, very common right now amongst wizards, if they walk into a room, most of the time they're going to throw a light orb. That reveals your rogue. He's just kind of sitting there now, useless. So rogue requires very specific situations to be useful, and even then, it's like a lot of his entire kit can basically be nullified as long as a wizard is like smart enough to throw a light orb in a room. So it's definitely very, very hard to make rogue work. Other than that, like I said, there's like a couple more comps you can run. Like obviously you could run like anything like this, like any you could run like any like any of these right here. I think this is probably still S tier. Like cleric plus bard plus literally any character that's not these two is obviously always going to be viable just by the nature of how the game works. Is it going to lose to some comps? Yes. Like if you run into a wizard, you're basically just dead in this comp unless you get a really good crossbow shot off with a fighter, or maybe two or like crossbow and bard, crossbow off a bard and a fighter could kill a wizard. That's pretty much your only counterplay. So for that, it's not as good. But if we're going to talk about the absolute best comps in the meta, then obviously I think it is going to be these two right here. It is this one, cleric, wizard, ranger, with your cleric specifically being tanky, or then cleric, barbarian, wizard. These are definitely your two best comps. I don't think that's even close to being contested, and I highly recommend you run them. Other than that, I don't think there's much else that I wanted to go over. I just kind of want to give you guys like a quick little like meta rundown into my opinion of how good I think it is. And if I want to talk about specifically for a fighter for a minute, I don't think so. Right now, like let's say you want to play meta. Really, there's no reason to play fighter. I don't think so. If you want to play a meta, like anything that fighter could do, other characters can just do better right now. Cleric can basically fill the role of fighter if you build him tanky. Like actually, he literally can. Especially with like plus 3 all attributes, cleric can get very high amounts of HP and very high amounts of damage reduction. So cleric can fill the role of fighter while also being a healer and a damage dealer for his team magically. Barbarian could also do it. Obviously, they're not as tanky to physical aspects. They still can get relatively tanky. 40-50% damage reduction with 190 HP. Like, that's still pretty good for rangers, not to mention you don't just fall over to wizards. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that's all I wanted to talk about. I don't think there's anything else. Like maybe there's a team comp I'm missing or something. If so, if there's something, and if you disagree with me on this, feel free to tell me. Tell me what comp you think is very good. I would happily discuss it with you if you think it's very good. I mean, I always try to reply to comments on opinions like or stuff like that. Whenever people say something about what they think of, like I said in one of my videos, if they disagree or agree with me. So yeah, feel free to do that. Comment down below if you think these comps are accurate or if you think they're not. If you think I'm stupid, call me stupid. I will happily disagree and tell you why I think I am correct. And until next time, peace.